Okay, so in our previous video, what I want to point out is that when we added the date field, remember, into the columns so that we could see dates, what Excel automatically did was it created two new fields called quarters and years, right? Just to show you, if you look at the order of the fields here, they map the same way in which the data table is. So here we've got date, customer name, region, product name. And if you look at it here, it's date, customer name, region, product name. So the same order happens here. And if you look at our sales data, the last field we have is gross profit percentage. But what's happened is that after the gross profit percentage over here, Excel added quarters and years. So quarters and years were not actually fields that were in this original data table, right? The reason it actually added them was because it's derived from the date field. So the moment you use the date field, you can see over here that it's added years, quarters, and then date. Now, one of the things I also want to point out is that with this, remember, we could manually expand and collapse. So I could expand quarter 2 and quarter 3, and then I could also click on the minus sign to basically collapse it, right? If we wanted to close this off, let's say we want to view more of the table, right? On the pivot table analyze over here, you can see there's a field list option. This is called the field list. So if I tick this off, it basically then hides it. If I take it back on, it'll bring it back on. So that's just useful to know when you want to use your full screen to view as much of the pivot table as possible. You can also click here to close it off, and then later on to add it, you would just select the field list under the pivot table analyze. Now, one of the things I wanted to show you is, you could be manually expanding and collapsing all of these, but let's say you wanted to expand all of them so you could see all of the months, right? To go into each one and expand it manually would obviously take quite a lot of time because there's a lot of different quarters. What you can do instead is that if you right click on any of the quarters names, you'll see under the expand collapse option there is a thing called expand entire field. So if I click on expand entire field, you can see now if I scroll across, it's expanded all of them. All the quarters are fully expanded with the dates. Similarly, if I wanted to now basically collapse all of these so I don't see the months, I only see the quarters, if I right click on any of them over here and I go to the expand collapse, I can select collapse entire field, and you can see that they basically all collapsed. All right, now the other thing we wanted to go is let's add our field list back over here. What we can do if we want to now remove, let's say we just wanted to look at the total sales and we want to remove these fields from the column, right? There's two ways of doing that. If you click on this drop down on any field that's listed in any of these areas, if you click on the little arrow drop down, there is a remove field option. So I could click on that to remove the field. Now you can see I removed the year, so it's only showing quarters. And the other way of doing it though is I could click, hold, and drag. So if I click and drag it back and drop it into that area, it removes it. Now you can see it's only showing the months. And of course, if I click and drag the final one, it basically then comes back to how we originally had it, which is the sum of all the sales across all of the dates by customer. Now, let's have a quick look at how the filter works. And for the filter, what we're going to do is we're going to select the years, right? And what we're going to do is drag the years and drop it into the filter area. The moment I did that, you'll see this appeared over here, which is the filter. And what this is currently set is at all, right? Now, if I click on this drop down, what it's saying to me is all means it's taking all of the data from this data set. So every single line item is being included. However, I can now basically select a particular year. So if I wanted to look at 2021 only, if I click on 2021 and I say, okay, now these numbers have been refreshed and they're showing me the sales for 2021. Similarly, I could do the same for 2020. If I click on 2020, I can click on OK, and now it's showing me the sales for 2020. So you can see how the filter basically allows us to filter the data on some category, right? I also want to point out that you don't also need to have only a single field in the filter. You can filter by multiple fields at the same time. So for example, we could also take the product category that we have over here, and let's say we drag that as well. So now we've got two filters, right? We've got 2020, and then we can say, well, we don't want to filter by, we want to filter, for example, and look at baking, at the baking products in 2020. And now, so this basically tells us this was the sales to each of these customers for baking products in 2020. So you can see how we can basically choose exactly what data we want to see based on that detail. Now, I should also note that on this filter, if I click on it, you can also tick on select multiple items. So now, instead of just having baking, I could say, for example, I wanted to look at baking, beverages, bread and bakery, and I say okay, it gives me those multiple items. To see what they are, I do need to click on that icon to see those are the ones that are selected. But for those three product categories, this is the sales that were basically made by customer in the year 2020. And of course, I could also look at more than 1 year. If I clicked on that drop down, I selected multiple items, and let's say I wanted to look at the sum of the 2 years, I could do it for 2020 and 2021 by ticking them both on and saying okay. So now I basically have 2. Right, so that's basically how the filter works. So hopefully that gives you a sense. Again, you can see in this particular case, we didn't even use the columns. We could, of course, now if I drag this years across into that, you basically still have the product category that you can select it, but now it's showing you by year. So you can see that it's saying in this category, if I select, let's say we select just if I now select, let's say the cereal as well as the frozen foods and fruits, I can now basically see that these are the sales for those categories by customer for each of the years. Now, the one thing you may notice is that 2019 is missing. And the reason is that even though we drag the filter across into this area of columns, that filter is still being applied. You can see it by looking at that icon next to it. So even within this area, you can apply filters. And that's quite important to know. So if I click on that drop down, which is not in the filter area here on top, remember this filters product category is sitting right at the top, but within the table itself, you can also apply filters, and you can see that the filters were applied for those 2 years only. If I now edit, basically select all, and I say okay, you can see all of them would apply. And similarly, even on this drop down here for customers, I could also apply a filter if I didn't want to view all the customers. Let's say I deselected them all and I only selected a few customers. You can see now that there's only a few customers selected. And the way to tell that a filter is being applied is you'll see on the drop down, there's basically a little filter icon that's basically listed there. That tells you that on the row labels, which is the customer names, the different customers, we have a filter being applied.